two. 1, 2, 3.
Are you ready, America? It's time for another edition of Game On. With your host, Stevie Ray Braun, and Brad Bad News Bollinger. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Game On. Talking about your favorite sports and different parts of life. Might even get a little take on Lane Kiffin's wife. They tell you what they think and not afraid to take a stance. They'll give you the number of pleats in Charlie Weiss's pants. They're the game on guys, see sports through their eyes. Political correctness just up and dies when they give you their views on any sport you want to hear. They're the game on guys, eating fries, drinking beer.
That's right, it is Game On. That's Brad Bollinger. I'm Steve Braun. Glad you could join us on another episode of Game On. It is October 9th, 2024. I'd be remiss not to give a happy birthday out to the man that sang that song. It's belated, I know. But Ralph Bollinger, happy birthday to Brad's dear old dad.
Big 71.
Ooh, man.
I know. Everyone thinks he's 95, but
I was going to go
actually
younger.
71. Oh, okay.
I'm trying to stay on his good side.
He paid you to say that.
He's like one of 3 listeners I think we have, so
Yeah. Well, you know,
it's like Alex and it's your dad.
I'll take care of the other ones. This is like payback for when he was coaching my teams growing up, and you know, he was extra hard on me, so it looked like he wasn't playing favorites with the rest of the team type of thing. So this is my payback. I've waited a long time for this.
30-something years. Here it is.
Yeah.
You're welcome. Let's lead it off. The game that really I think matters here is OU Texas. Red River Rivalry taking place this Saturday, 2:30 start time. The SEC Network's pregame show, I forget what they call it, is going to be on hand. You're getting Herb Street and his dog to call the game. They're flying in from Oregon after game day is over. So Texas and Oklahoma, the number 1 team in the nation, Texas Longhorns, taking on the Oklahoma Sooners, who don't seem to have an offense. And if you looked at the injury report as of 7 o'clock tonight on October 9th, Deion Burks is questionable. Cade McIntyre is questionable. And then it's a bunch of outs. Jaden Gibson, Jaleel Farouk, Nick Anderson, and Andrell Anthony all out. And from what I understand with Deion Burks, it is not looking like he will play either on Saturday. Undisclosed what that injury is. A lot of people think it is a concussion, but still it has not been confirmed one way or the other. He is questionable as of Wednesday. Concerning, I would say. That might be putting it lightly.
Was there an update on Tatum?
Tatum is not listed.
Okay. Good.
So that's a good sign. I mean, that would allude to the fact that he is playing or going to play. For Texas, C.J. Baxter's out, Christian Clark, Belton Gardner. Colin Page, the running back, is questionable. And then Quinn Ewers is probable to play. So still lingering, but it looks like he will indeed be out there for the Longhorns. So, Brad, thoughts?
That injury report, week in and week out, is the bane of my existence.
Mm-hmm.
It just sucks because it's a situation where I keep going back to, I just want to see them fully healthy 1 week. I mean, I know that's hard to do throughout the season to be fully healthy, but like 90% healthy, 80% healthy. I mean, have some of their weapons back, maybe. It's very frustrating because there's a lot of complaints about the offensive side of the ball, and for good reason. But again, at the end of the day, I don't think you can just dismiss missing all of those weapons on the outside at the receiver position. I mean, that's brutal. And not getting Burks back this week is a backbreaker. I do like that Tatum's going to be back. I think they're going to rely heavily on Barnes and Tatum, hopefully. Hawkins is going to have to make some plays like he always does. But someone's got to step up. I mean, whether that be, you saw Hester make a big play. I'm still waiting on those tight ends to show up in some way that I was expecting them to at the beginning of the year after, a decent start. I feel like Jackson Arnold looked like he had a little bit of a connection with Bauer Sharp, and then that kind of faded away. And we haven't heard much from the tight ends since then, but
Other than
it's going to be,
flags.
it's, yeah, it's going to be brutal. But that being said, I don't think it's going to be as easy as some people might think it will be for Texas. I think it's going to be a close game, honestly. I think a lot of OU fans probably have PTSD from the last 20 years or so of our defensive performances, but I really do believe in this defense. I think that they are a good defense, and that feels good to say. With all the trouble that's been on the offensive side of the ball, I'm pleased to say that I do think OU has a good defense. Maybe I'm cursing them at this moment, so clip this, but I do think OU's defense will keep them hanging around. The offense has to make a few plays. Like it can't just be, as you saw with Tennessee, it can't just be defense wins the entire game for them because practically speaking, that's not reasonable.
Yeah.
Hawkins is going to have to make a play, maybe break out a big run like he did against Auburn. I'd like to see Barnes and Tatum make some more plays because they are very capable. They're going to need, honestly, like if they could get 3 or 4 big plays out of that offense and produce touchdowns, then I think it's going to be a very close game. Quinn Ewers coming back is going to be interesting. Not sure what his health status really is. I'm sure he's fine. I'm sure they were
Mhm.
playing it cautious. They had Arch Manning, so there's no need to rush him back anyway. But that being said, I I don't know. I maybe I'm naive, but um, I think the point spread right now is a little bit much. It's at Texas minus 14 and a
14 and a
half.
half. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that I don't understand that way of, that logic of getting to that number, but someone who hates to bet on his own teams, I mean, that number sticks out to me and it's kind of appealing because that means you have to get 14 and a half points away from that defense, which I think is a tall, tall task. Maybe the offense completely poops the bed and
Mhm.
they hit that number. I mean, very possible. Maybe the offense turns the ball over, pick sixes, fumbles, puts the defense in bad situations where they have the short field that Texas capitalizes on. Maybe that happens. But 14 and a half, that's a lot of points. So I think it's going to be closer than people think.
Yeah, I can see that. I'm not full fledged willing to go there yet, but
It
I
is scary. I'm not denying that it's a scary game, but
well, Sarah,
it's always scary, isn't it? I mean,
yeah.
there's always a
Oh
chance of
yes,
something stupid happening. So,
yeah. With this game, it is always terrifying. Sarah asked me this morning. I think it was this morning. My wife, for those that may not know, um,
ooh,
yeah. She was like,
ladies, man.
how you feeling about the game Saturday? And I said, I'm preparing my heart for the worst, but I do have a little bit of optimism just because of this game. I mean, that's a lot of it. Is just
Cautiously optimistic, right?
yes, it's one of those that I'm totally going in with the thought of, hey, they are the number one team in the nation. Their offense is better than ours. Their defense is probably, it may not be as good as OU's, but it is a solid defense, and that leaves me concerned. I could see this thing getting completely out of hand, but I could also easily see it being a lot tighter than it should be because the defense is good for OU. They're really good. And I think if you can get out in front and maybe get a touchdown here and maybe a stop here, that like it could start playing into their minds, especially after what happened last season. I think there's a little bit of they were 8 point favorites last year. They're now 14 and a half point favorites. They lost last year in the last seconds. I just think there is that aspect of could that get in their head. And looking back at their game against Mississippi State, they did have two fumbles. Like they can turn the ball over. So I think that is something that OU's got to be able to capitalize. You mentioned defense is going to have to do something. Defense is probably going to have to score at least once, maybe some special teams plays take place that swing the field or lead to points as well. But that's going to be a big part in my mind of can they get anything going offensively. Now, Michael Hawkins has he's spent 2 years now with, or 2 years, pardon me, 2 weeks now of really being the guy, being the starter and having those snaps and being able to run the offense. So I think that's another aspect that could be very beneficial.
Yeah, and an interesting point that I don't think a lot of people are really talking about is how strong really has Texas's strength of schedule been this year? I mean, you look at that Michigan win in the Big House. At the time, it seemed like a very massive win. I mean, they went in and handled business. They dominated Michigan start to finish. No
Mm-hmm.
denying that. But what happened to Michigan when they went to Washington last week? They got handled again. So how good is Michigan this year, right? So now I kind of start to question how good is that win really at this point? I don't think Texas has really been tested so far. I think Oklahoma is going to be the best team that they've played at this point of this season, especially in this environment. I mean, you know, crazy things have happened. Even, clearly the better side has lost these games before. I mean, it would be nothing new, but Texas's schedule is very interesting because even the rest of the way home for them, they don't really have that hard of a schedule. So I think it's really played out well for them this year. I'm not saying they aren't worthy of the number one ranking. I'm not saying they're not a great team. I'm not saying they're not a national championship contender. But I will say the schedule doesn't really drive that point home to me in their favor. So, let's roll the ball out there, the 50-yard line, the Red River rivalry. And I think this will be a good measuring stick for Texas. I mean, we talk about OU all the time. I think this will be a good, where are we at this point in the season with Texas? Because I think they have the best team in football right now. And I think they have the best shot of winning a national championship. I know a lot of people like Ohio State. There's always Georgia, Alabama's of the world, but Texas is the favorite to me right now. And even if they lose this game, if Oklahoma finds a way to win this game, I still think Texas is in a prime position to, I mean, still get a bye probably. Honestly, they could still win the SEC very easily. I don't think this is a make or break for Texas at all. OU, I mean, it's essentially a make or break, I think. Because if we're not going to win this game, then I think it's kind of a throwaway this season at this point. I think it's the situation where we go, okay, now we've got two losses here. Let's try and kind of build this thing for next year, which, I mean, they can still salvage the season. Don't get me wrong. It can still be a productive, good year. But as far as, playoff aspirations, I know we're not really talking about that a lot, but I mean, this is important and they need to show up and they need to perform.
Yeah, I won't say it's make or break for OU by any means because I think a lot of people have kind of written off the playoff possibility at this
I'm
point.
looking at a lot of the remaining schedule for OU too. I mean, the
Yes.
last few weeks are brutal.
Yeah, I think then you start looking at South Carolina as a game that you have to go win for sure. If you lose
100%.
Texas, you're going to have to beat Maine,
Oklahoma should
which,
be Oklahoma should be beating South Carolina.
yeah,
They like there's you can talk about where they're at in the progress and the Venables era, all that. There's no arguing Oklahoma football should be beating South Carolina this year. There's no excuse for them to lose to that team.
But I mean, once you get South Carolina and Maine, that will get you bowl eligible. After that, who knows? I mean, that gets you to 6 wins. After that, Ole Miss, probably not right now. But if you go beat Texas, then mentally you can start saying, okay, that's a chance.
What if they beat Texas? And hey, what if after that they get their wide receivers back? They have a
Yeah.
wide receiver room. Like, who knows what can happen? That's what I'm saying. If you can find a way to like pull this one out, I think you've got a lot of momentum. And I don't know. I don't think anybody really knows outside of that locker room the real status of those injuries,
Oh,
right?
no. No.
It seems very dark and not promising because, I mean, I'm questioning why those guys haven't been back already. So obviously, there's some
Well,
serious situations going on.
Andrew Anthony, Brent Venables mentioned, I think it was earlier this week, maybe Monday during his press conference or Tuesday during his press conference, Monday during his coach's show. He said that Andrew Anthony went back underneath the knife. So they had to go in and clean things up. So you're looking at another 4 weeks potentially there. Jalil Farouk, I think you're still 3 weeks out, give or take, on his return from where that was determined, how many weeks when he was injured in the first week. Jaden Gibson's not coming back this season. Nick Anderson is another one that he may have came back too early because the wide receiver room was hurting so bad. Retweaks or injures, and now who knows when he comes back. And if you look at his family history when it comes to injuries, Rodney wasn't exactly the healthiest of players for OU. Now, was he effective when he was out there and healthy? Yes, he was overly effective at running back. Nick Anderson seems to be the same thing. When he's healthy and he's out there, he's great. But we haven't seen him outside of a series this year. So I think that's a big one. Gentry Williams is also out. Kendall Dolby, we know that one. His season is over. And then Garen Hatchett out as well. His season's over as well. So 3 of those guys, their seasons are over anyways. And it's really Farouk, Anderson, and then whenever Anthony can come back from what they're saying or alluding to was kind of a cleanup procedure for that knee.
It's brutal.
It really
I-
is.
I'm kind of wondering at what point they start to try to maybe incorporate one of those running backs kind of out at the slot position, or you know what I mean? Like if if a receiver that's healthy and available to play can't step up this weekend, I mean, there's clearly nothing there with these, fifth, sixth string guys. I mean, clearly there's just nothing there. So I'm wondering, I talk about adjustments this whole season, but I mean, what's the answer here? Do they just say screw it and run the ball 80% of the time?
I,
I mean, what's the answer?
but you don't have the offensive line to do that.
No,
Your
you
offensive line has
don't.
shown nothing, and adding more of them at tight end type positions and trying to go power, that doesn't seem like a good idea. So
Right.
yeah,
Well, I mean, you talk about, I mean, adjustments and finding some sort of answer. That's kind of why I was like, maybe you get Tatum out in the flat there and get him in some space, throw him like a swing screen or something like that. Like try different things to try and get some mismatches because for all that being said, Barnes and Tatum, I think, are really, really good players, and I think they can make a lot of plays. You mentioned the offensive line has been struggling a little bit, so we haven't been able to see a ton of that. But I just would like to see getting them the ball in better opportunities for them to kind of make some people miss because when it gets clogged up behind that line of scrimmage and the holes are being filled by that defensive line, then yeah, they can't really do very much. I mean, if we're just running that RPO off tackle or whatever it may be. So I'd like to see them maybe get, we don't talk about this a lot, but maybe they should be getting east and west a little bit more.
yep, that might be the case. All right, let's get to some quick hitters across college football land.
Okay, game on!
All right, some other things that are around the college football world, Brad. Upset over in Nashville as Vanderbilt knocked off Alabama. That was a wild game, and it just seemed like Bama just could never really get it going. They were in a fog and a haze, and nothing seemed to turn the tide for a really bad dad pun there.
Yeah. Yeah. We've got to give Vanderbilt credit. I think they're a much different football team this year. They've been very competitive all year long, honestly. I don't, I mean, obviously, this is a huge surprise and shock, but I am not really that shocked that they were making it a competitive game. I mean, of course, you expect Alabama to win easily, but like I still think Vanderbilt was going to put up a fight. They have been doing it all year long. They're a better football team, and I know that's weird to say with the Vanderbilt team, but it's the facts. And it made it extra like surreal to me looking out at their stadium, some of the shots of their stadium because they're under construction and a lot of their seats are missing, so they weren't able to have as many fans as they probably would have liked. And but I mean, they still showed up and got a huge victory, biggest victory in school history. I'm just going to go out on a limb and say,
Yeah.
and there's some excitement in Nashville. I love it. I think it's really good for. First of all, I think it's good for the SEC conference because yes, the conference has been dominant for so long now, and it's clearly the best conference. But there were some laughing stocks towards the bottom of the rung there in the SEC for a long, long time. And to see Vanderbilt making some progress and kind of climbing up that ladder, I think it's really encouraging for the conference. And I'm sure Alabama doesn't love that it's at their expense, but I mean, Alabama's fine. They still control their own destiny. So it's not a catastrophic loss by any means. I think it's interesting what this loss would have looked like when it was the four playoff team era, because man,
Oh,
that could have been real bad. But you know, hey, we're in this 12 playoff team era now, so not as dire as it would have been. So I think it was just a good story. It was just a fun win. It was a fun game to watch too. So um, I'm hoping for more of that because last week wasn't supposed to be that exciting of a week in college football, and it turned out to be really entertaining with a few upsets and
four of the top
um,
11 with an
yeah,
upset.
and it really changed the kind of landscape of the SEC picture too, because teams like Tennessee and Alabama, Georgia, all have one loss. So um, I mean, that week kind of come in, under the radar, and it could change the whole look and feel of the conference this year.
And the best part of it is SEC shorts. You got a little bit of Vandy just getting to strut in because they are back. They're back. I don't think they were ever there, but yeah, it seems to be working for them. You mentioned Tennessee losing to Arkansas. That was interesting. And how much are Arkansas fans kicking themselves for that Oklahoma State game?
Yes. My goodness,
I
yes.
mean, you had that in the bag. Now knowing what Oklahoma State is as well, I think that even makes it a little worse looking back at that game. And yes, you could have won that easily. And then now you look at what Oklahoma State is, and it's like, man, that is one that got away for the Razorback fans for sure.
Yeah, I mean, the Arkansas fans shouldn't really expect anything different, to be honest. I mean,
No,
this is what it's like being Arkansas, right? They have flashes of brilliance, and sometimes you think, I think Arkansas might contend this year, and then they just go out and give up a huge lead to Oklahoma State, an Oklahoma State team who turns out to be just real bad this year. They are in a nosedive, and who knows what's going to happen there. But back to Arkansas. I mean, clearly the talent is there, and they're very capable of being a good football team. But losses like that do kill you. I mean, that we talked about. I just talked about Vanderbilt and Alabama, how that would have been a catastrophic loss back in the four playoff team era.
yeah,
Arkansas losing to Oklahoma State is catastrophic in the 12 playoff team era. I'm not insinuating in any way that Arkansas would have gotten the top 12, right? I'm not saying
Yeah.
that. But at this point, I think you could have looked at it and said, hey, there's some sort of path for Arkansas to possibly make a run at that thing. And with that loss, I mean, it's kind of a lot harder and probably impossible at this point. But I mean, that's that's another reason why I always laughed at pundits who were so against expanding the playoffs because they were worried about it taken away from the regular season, right? Like regular season means less, and it's like Arkansas lost early in the year to Oklahoma State, and that had the biggest impact on their year. I mean, you're still going to have important regular seasons. Those games that you lose, those games that you throw away, that you lose to Oklahoma State, to Vanderbilt, those will still haunt you, and those are still important. So I think we're seeing that play out in this first year of the 12-team playoff.
Well, and I think this is going to end up allowing more teams, and we've talked about it before. It's going to allow more teams to have relevant games going into November. And Arkansas would be the greatest point of that. If they would have beat Oklahoma State in regulation or even in overtime when they could have made the field goal, if they win that game and you go and beat a Tennessee, even after you lost Texas A&M, you're heading into LSU this week with, hey, this is we win this game, we're right in the thick of it when it comes to playoffs. Then you get Mississippi State, that's a winnable game, and now you're into November and you're in the final 4 game stretch, and you have a legit shot, even with one more loss. I mean, that's the other thing.
Right.
They go Ole Miss, Texas, LSU, or excuse me, Louisiana Tech, and then Missouri to close out the season. You end up losing one of those 4 games, and you could conceivably be talking about an Arkansas team in the playoff mix. But now that you lost Oklahoma State, it's a lot. You can't lose more than likely one of those games, unless it's a Texas number one Texas. If Texas is number one going into that game on November 16th, then yeah, you might be able to make that talk. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
And we talked about in the beginning of the year too. We talked about this thing's going to look different than past years as far as you need to get used to the idea of two lost teams in the playoffs being the norm. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
you're not going to be surprised even if a three loss playoff team is there at this point. I mean, it's turning more into that professional football side of things where it's like, guys, undefeated seasons are really a thing of the past. I'm not saying they're not going to happen from time to time. And I mean, with the smaller schools who have the easy schedule, they might make a run and try and get that 12 seed. But as far as the big schools, I mean, 2, 3 losses, that's going to be the norm. And we have to get used to that, which I think it's a little weird for people to comprehend because that's what I was saying about Alabama's loss to Vandy was I don't think Alabama fans should panic at this point. I mean, yes, it was a bad loss and that should never happen, but they still have a little bit of cushion there. They can still, I think they can still drop another one and have a reasonable shot of getting in there, you
I
know? So,
yeah, I agree, and we talked about that at the start of the season that we're going to see a lot more, and it's because there's so much parity within these leagues now too, and with
mhm.
transfers and all of that, it's allowing some of those teams that maybe don't do as great of a job or didn't have, um, they don't have the prestige when it comes to getting those top or 5 star type recruits. Now you can go pick those type of players from those lesser conferences. You can go into
Yeah,
a Tulsa and get a Zaven Collins probably moving forward with a lot more ease because you're going to be able, a Vanderbilt's going to be able to throw money at a guy like that. I mean,
yeah.
you look at their quarterback. He came from New Mexico State. Let's continue on. 3 games that kind of stand out this week outside of OU Texas. There's Oregon, Ohio State, Ole Miss, LSU, and K State at Colorado. I think the Oregon Ohio State probably is up there. It may be the prime game when you look at this schedule. Um, 2 teams that are up at the top of the standings and or the rankings polls, and um, it'll be interesting to see how does Oregon match up against what is a very talented Ohio State team. Now, yes, they have Will Howard, the quarterback for Ohio State, played at Kansas State. Dylan Gabriel, a former OU quarterback, now at Oregon. Ducks haven't looked great, but Dan Lanning with his defense, are they able to slow down Ohio State, and can the offense put up enough points?
Right. And kind of goes along with the theme of just win. I mean,
Yeah,
it doesn't have to look pretty anymore. You're not putting on a showcase for BCS voters or top four voters, right? I mean, you don't have to really get style points anymore at this point. You just need to win.
yeah,
And that's what Oregon's done. I do think that that win against Boise State was a good victory. I mean, you have the Heisman frontrunner on that Boise State squad, and they still found a way to win that game. This is going to be a whole nother ball game, in my opinion. Ohio State's very talented. I've always liked Will Howard. I think he's good, steady hand to steer the ship of a team. And going into a program like Ohio State, I think it's a situation where guys like that, I mean, just don't mess it up. Just keep the ship going, right? I mean, there's so much talent everywhere on that field in those programs that, I mean, just don't lose them games. And I think Will Howard is very capable of doing that. So, um, I'm not a believer in Oregon necessarily as far as national championship contenders at this point in the year. I think they're a little bit of smoke and mirrors, honestly. I like Ohio State in this one, but that's what these games are for. And it's going to be fun to watch. Oregon gets home field advantage, which is huge. I mean, playing in Eugene is no joke. So maybe they can, put it all together. I think it's fair to kind of give them some grace as well of, um, in the area of the transfer portal and getting new guys in all the time. I think it takes time to mesh sometimes and build that chemistry. And you got a guy like Dylan Gabriel who comes from Oklahoma to Oregon. I think I think it takes him a little bit of time to adjust to the people around him and the play calling and all of that. So maybe Oregon kind of builds strength as the year goes on and looks better and better. Very possible. But at this point, I like Ohio State.
yeah. It'll be fun to see. I'm not going to pick either side. If I had to
It's
lean,
measuring stick week.
it
That's what I'm
is.
calling it.
I like that. I like that. Ole Miss, LSU, both teams with one loss. It'll be interesting to see. Yes, Ole Miss was able to rebound with a game against South Carolina after the loss to Kentucky, but really the first true test, at least ranking wise, for the Rebels, and then LSU. It's really their first test since that loss in Vegas to USC that they should have ended up winning. So um, it'll be a fun game there between those two squads in Baton Rouge, and then Kansas State at Colorado. Colorado has been sneaky. They've been sneaky after the loss to Nebraska. They're 4-1. Both of those teams 4-1. K State ranked. Um, Chris Kleiman, he's always got good teams and always seems to win. Yes, they lost earlier this season, but that should be a fun one as well in Boulder.
Yeah, I think Colorado is very interesting. Uh, I see them as kind of a team that can kind of expose pretenders during the year. I think they get wins against teams that we originally think are going to be better than they are. And then Colorado, will go in and get. I mean, I'm not saying that their wins haven't been impressive or anything like that. I don't want to keep, just poo-pooing them all year long. But this Kansas State team, I think, will tell me a lot about where Colorado is. We talked about measuring stick week, but um, Kansas State is a type of team where it's like, okay, if Colorado beats Kansas State, then I think we need to start taking Colorado a little bit more seriously. I think they are a bigger threat if they beat a team like Kansas State. Obviously, they have one of the best players in the country in Travis Hunter. Shedeur Sanders has some really positive traits and looks good when he gets, kind of the help around him. So this is an exciting week. I love this slate of games.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. It's another week, and that means there's another Super League, at least out there, theory. This one is referred to as Project Rudy. It's spearheaded by former Disney executives. that have turned into investment professionals, and they are looking at a Super League-esque concept. It's a separate and more simplified than the one made public last week that we talked about. This one, 4 power conferences, 70-team structure, preserves the 4 power conferences, expands the postseason, overhauls scheduling, tiers revenue distribution as well. Over the last 4 months, athletic directors at more than 25 power conference programs have seen the presentation of Project Rudy. Either others have had phone calls or Zoom calls about it. 3 of the 4 power conference commissioners were shared details of the model, those being the SEC, the Big 12, and the ACC. And Jack Swarbrick, the former Notre Dame athletic director, he is on board just 6 months after he sat on the college football playoff governing committee. Miami athletic director Dan Radakovich said this to Yahoo Sports: "Of all the ideas I've seen, this one makes the most sense. Conferences are kept intact. Commissioners still have an important and valuable role, and there's the ability for schools to make increased money from bigger matchups and more playoff games." Goes on into more details. You can check this out from Ross Dellinger on Yahoo Sports, and we'll try to tweet it out on our Twitter page as well. But it goes into the tiers, and the tiers would be set up like this. Top 16 schools would earn per school revenue projections from $130 million in year 4, escalating up to $250 million in year 12, which would double the SEC and Big Ten's current distribution rate. Tier 2, the next 22 schools earn a revenue of $60 to $110 million, similar to the SEC and Big Ten current rates. And then Tier 3, the last 32 schools earn projections of $30 to $60 million. There would be relegation and promotion systems within that to move between tiers, even depending on how you would do in previous years. And this is all while we're looking at, I believe, tomorrow on Thursday, that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to get together to talk about their scheduling. So again, it seems to be changing every single week. Last Friday, 2 university presidents, West Virginia and Syracuse, authored an open letter in the Chronicle of Higher Education urging their presidential colleagues to take action to avoid the Big Ten and SEC merging into a 36-school Super League. And this may be that try. Does it have any legs? Who knows? We'll see. I think it's interesting that Miami's AD kind of talked about, hey, that seems the most feasible. Brett Yormark told the Houston Chronicle last weekend, one thing is for sure, fans don't want an artificial championship. They want a real championship just like every other sport. There are no free passes. Let's earn it. And talking about the expansion of the playoffs as well and the potential of the 2 conferences merging, yada, yada, yada. Again, I think we're moving this way. Same song, different verse, or maybe a different song, but it sure sounds like the other song. We're moving this direction. Is it going to be a lot of the power teams? Yes. It's probably going to be the 4 power conferences and maybe sprinkle in some of those West Coast teams. But there, a lot of those that would be in there anyways are already in one of those 4 conferences. So I think we're moving closer and closer. It's just a matter of how do they make this one happen. This one includes, I think it's $9 billion, if I remember reading correctly. I'll have to scroll back up on the story. Yeah, $9 billion of private capital cash into the system. That's probably enticing for a lot of those schools. You throw in the TV contracts, it would start once the TV contracts are up, which is like 2031, I think, for a majority of them. That's when you would see this probably really take off. That's 7 years away. So even then, I bet certain TV networks would be willing to get out of that for this.
Right.
ESPN and Fox, if they know they're going to get the rights to this thing, then they'll be happy to say, yeah, we're okay. We're good. Let's go ahead and get this going, because this will be of much more value.
Yeah, it's just goes to show that this is really kind of a transitional time in the sports, and we've seen a lot of changes over the last few years, and we're going to continue to see changes. I think over the next 10 years, we're going to see constant change, and that's just how it is. And I don't think that's a good or a bad thing necessarily. Um, but I think a lot of traditional fans are going to complain and moan like they always do when there's any change whatsoever. But I think people realize that this is a huge moneymaker. I mean, this is a business, just like the NIL and paying players. I mean, it's a business. It's a high earning business,
Well, and
and they're going to treat it as such.
you have the House agreement that came down, and a judge at least preliminarily approved that, and that's going to pay players, expand rosters, all of that. To be able to do that, you're going to have revenue income or revenue, uh, new revenue, expanded revenue that will come in, and this is a way of being able to do that. And because it's not just football, it's going to be basketball, it's going to be women's sports as well, because it's all under Title IX, and that's one of the things that I think I I personally hate it in a sense of I hate that it's under the guise of the universities. If this is going to take place, it needs to happen outside of universities because it's outside of the mission of what these universities are really supposed to be doing. And that's what annoys me is these universities are getting further away from what they're supposed to be doing, which is educating people. And it's not supposed to be in the business of making millions and billions of dollars. And yeah, they need to make money to be able to, but what they're doing here is not going back to the academic side. It's away from what they need to be doing. And that's a whole different story for a totally different type of podcast. But it is one of the things that it annoys me in that sense of I'm I wish these university presidents would go, you know what, this isn't what we're in the business of. But none of them want to turn down these dollars. So they're going to continue on this ride until it crashes and burns. And it will one day. When that is, who knows? We'll be dead. But until then, we're going to keep chasing the buck, and that's where we're at in the world right now. All right, let's transition now to the NFL. Robert Saleh fired. Aaron Rodgers got his way. Woody Johnson went around the general manager and canned him on Tuesday. They turned to their defensive coordinator to be the interim head coach. Shocking, I think, that it came this early in the season. Because why would you have kept him if you were just going to turn around and fire him 5 weeks in? Why not go get a new head coach in the off season and see what you can get going moving forward instead of hanging on to him and then 5 weeks in getting. I've never understood that. It just shows that Woody Johnson and the Jets are incompetent and they will continue having struggles. There's a reason why Sam Darnold has had success. There's a reason why Geno Smith is having success elsewhere away from the Jets. It's because that organization is a complete mess. Robert Saleh said so when he got the job, and within the first year, that was one of the biggest things is, hey, I've got to change the culture around here. That says a lot. And he wasn't just talking about in the locker. It was organizationally. We got to get things, and it's like, that should say everything you need to know. And
Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see where they turn in the future. I doubt this defensive coordinator really has a shot. There's too many other guys. Mike Vrabel, Bill Belichick. One of those two will probably end up with this job. Maybe you get somebody else, but I think Bill Belichick's about the only. He's probably the guy that has to go in there because he could, in theory, clean that culture up of the whole organization.
I
But
mean,
even then,
can
who
he?
knows?
Can he?
That's the great question. I mean, can he though? Maybe if you give him enough control. And
I
does
mean,
he?
you talk about a
But does
subject
he
for
want
my
it?
podcast. I mean, we can talk about Bill Belichick's legacy for hours, in my opinion,
Oh
because
yes, yeah.
I've always very adamant on my stand on the whole Patriots dynasty. Was it Belichick? Was it Brady? I have a very firm stance, and um, so not only that, I'm not saying Belichick's not a good coach, but like does he even have the patience and will to want to do something like that at this point? I mean, does he really want to go in there and just try and turn around that organization? I mean, maybe he would like to go somewhere that's a little more established already, because I'm not sure how many coaching years he has left in him, to be honest with you. I mean, we act like he's not an older gentleman. We
Yeah,
talk about him rebuilding a franchise and all this stuff, and it's like he doesn't have that long left as far as like active coaching years. And
72
I
years
mean, he
old.
might like this. He might like this, broadcasting side, analyst side. That I mean, he might end up saying, "Hey, this is much easier.
Spending
I don't
time
really
with his
need the money
24-year.
anymore." Yeah, I mean, maybe he'll be advisors for teams, but I don't know. I don't see Belichick taking on a full gut job of an organization, but who knows? Maybe he has something to prove as well with the whole Brady versus Belichick thing. Maybe he wants one last shot at, making his case. So we'll see. But the Jets are a mess. And the fact that Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback of that team now during this mess just is like a cherry on top because, I mean, how many more people in this league are more unlikable than Aaron Rodgers, just in general?
Ooh.
Just his attitude, and the way he goes about things and the way he talks about people to people. He just feels so like he's just a dick, and like he feels very entitled. And I mean, he's had a great career, don't get me wrong, but like this man acts like he's Tom Brady, and he's not. And then all the off the field stuff just really like he digs himself in so many holes, and he never realizes that he just keeps digging. I mean, every time I hear him talk, I'm like, please just don't say anything to make me
Stop.
upset or annoyed with you. And he always finds a way. And that look on that dumb look on his face while he talks in his interviews and all this stuff on McAfee's show, and it's just exhausting. I mean, like even like I love Pat McAfee, but even at times this during this whole relationship that Rogers and McAfee have had, like I've even got annoyed with Pat McAfee at times. And it's like, dude, you are really going all in on this Aaron Rodgers relationships, which I know has been beneficial for you as far as like, having insider news about his situation and things like that. But I mean, I feel a lot of Aaron Rodgers fatigue, and it's very warranted.
You stink, and I don't like you.
That sums up Brad's thoughts.
Yes.
Um, Devontae Adams still looking to get traded. Jets, one of those landing spots potentially. Saints being the other. He basically wants to return to the quarterbacks that he knows, either the quarterback that he went into the league playing with in Aaron Rodgers or with Derek Carr, who he played college football with at Fresno State, and then the short time together at the Raiders. Um, any other landing spots? People keep throwing out, oh, the Chiefs, the Chiefs. I just don't see the Raiders trading in division and
Mhm.
giving another weapon to the Chiefs. I just can't see that happening. Maybe it will, but it just does not make sense to me. And that may be an old school thought process for me in that regard.
I mean, I've been thinking about landing spots too because I'm a Devonte Adams fantasy owner, and first of all, I just want the trade to get done because it's
Mm-hmm.
killing me just leaving him on my bench every week. And this week is extra cruel because I have Devonte Adams and Justin Jefferson sitting on my bench because Jefferson's on bye and Adams is just being waited or just waiting to get traded. And so I'm just like, this is killing me. Trade him anyway. I don't care at this point. But I think the Jets are probably the most likely landing spot for him, no pun intended. But obviously, the Saints make sense too. A team I was thinking about, I mean, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I'm kind of surprised that maybe the Dallas Cowboys don't make a play at Devontae. I know they just paid CD a ton of money and all of that, but they really don't have a number two, a number three. I mean, I know they liked to say that you know, they're invested in guys like Tolbert and things like that, but I don't buy it. I mean, they don't have a number two option and they don't have a running game. So to me, I would think bringing in a big second weapon like Devontae Adams would be beneficial for a team that, quite frankly, they have a window that's closing very fast. And it is like quite possibly with contract situations, it could be a crash and burn situation in the next few years. So, with that shrinking window, with Jerry Jones shrinking window, unless he's found the fountain of youth and he's never going to die, which sometimes I think it happens, um, I think why not take a risk on something like this? I mean, why not make a big splash? I know they don't always rush to spend their money in a timely manner. You look at Dak Prescott's contracts and CeeDee Lamb's contracts and all that, and Micah Parsons coming up. But I mean, clearly Adams is done in Vegas, right? I don't know if they're going to get what they want for Adams at this point, but I think it's pretty clear that he just needs to get out of that city. And for what his price tag is going to end up being, in my opinion, what I think it's going to be, I think it's worth the risk for a team like that.
I don't disagree. I think it. Those are all good landing spots in my mind. I mean, they all make sense for exactly the reasons that you had. All right, let's jump in. We got about 8 minutes left. Let's jump into our against the spread picks. Brad, I'll let you lead things off, my friend.
Yeah, did want to do a special shout out. This kind of ties into my spread picks, but New Orleans Saints named Spencer Rattler the starting quarterback for this week. So we're gonna get a Spencer Rattler versus Baker Mayfield game, which is very fascinating. Never thought I'd really hear that, to be honest with you, but um, that got me thinking today. Before I announce my picks here, real quick, I kind of broke it down, and an interesting statistic that I came up with in my own head.
Oh
My own,
wow,
I'm not the biggest mathematics
it's
guy, but
terrifying.
I realized with this news of Spencer Rattler starting this week, get this, get this, Steve. You ready?
I'm ready.
35% of the NFL games this weekend will feature a former Oklahoma quarterback who is starting for an NFL team. 35% of the games this weekend will feature a former Oklahoma quarterback. That's an incredible stat.
Jalen, Baker,
Kyler,
Kyler,
Caleb,
Caleb, Spencer.
Spencer. Correct. So five quarterbacks in the 14 games this weekend, and you're looking at 35%, which I think is a really cool stat. I'm not sure, what the record is for some weird stat like that is, but in this time of dark times offensively at Oklahoma, I think we need to kind of appreciate the current state of the NFL and kind of how cool, former OU players are kind of really making a name for themselves in the league. Blah 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 blah. Anyways, against the spread picks. Uh Transitioning to that, I do have the Saints and Buccaneers game as one of my picks. I'm taking the under in the Tampa New Orleans game. It's at 45 and a half right now. I don't buy into Spencer Rattler. I think he's going to have some growing pains, and I don't think Tampa is necessarily going to score a ton of points against the New Orleans defense either. Um, I was tempted to take the Buccaneers point spread, but I didn't want to completely screw myself in case it was a disaster. And we talk about emotional hedging all the time. So I just decided to play it safe with a 45 and a half under on that. I don't think it'll be an offensive showcase from the New Orleans side. And I think Tampa will just be smart with the ball. I think they'll score some points, but I don't see the total getting over 45 and a half. So I did move back to the college game this weekend.
Uh-oh.
And I am not emotionally hedging on this one. Give me Oklahoma plus 14 and a half in the Red River Rivalry. I decided if I'm going to be miserable, I want to be at the bottom of the pit, complete darkness. I want to be so sad that I don't want to watch football for the rest of the year. I'm all in on it. Why not? Let's do it. Oklahoma plus 14 and a half. Whew. Yeah. I feel like a little acid reflux just saying that, honestly. I'm getting a little nauseous. But finally, we talked about this game earlier. I kind of went over my reasons already, so I'll be quick. I'll take Ohio State minus 3.5 at Oregon.
I like that one. That was one of the ones I had. -3 at Oregon as I write it down so I can remember. And so Brad's picks: Tampa, New Orleans under 45.5, Oklahoma plus 14.5 versus Texas, Ohio State -3 at Oregon. Mine, as Brad went 3-0 last week. He is now 10-7-1 on the year. I went 1-2 last week. I am 9-9 on the year. So we're right around 500 or above it. So, I mean, it's better than most years for us. So for the final 3 minutes of the show, I'm going to rattle off mine real quick. I'm going to take Boise State -21.5 at Hawaii. Give me all the Ashton Genty stock I can get. Minnesota -5 at UCLA. The Bruins, not good. They are not good. Not good. And I'm going to take Clemson -20 at Wake Forest. I'm all in on the brother Riley and Dabo and Klubnik. Give it to me. Give it. I'll take it. It worked for me last week. That was the only win I had. So I'll take it until it fails me. And then I'll treat them like they're Texas State. I shouldn't have taken a shot at GJ there. That was my bad. That was mean. I shouldn't have done it. I repent. I apologize. All right, you can always.
Since.
What's that?
I'm surprised you haven't picked him since.
Fool me once.
Fool me 27 times.
Fool me 32nd time.
Keep up, 10, 15 seconds here to keep up with my weekly tradition of pumping up Ashton Genty. I have a fun stat that I just want to give you since you picked Boise State. Courtesy of Alex Kirshner at Alex_Kirshner on Twitter. I'm not calling it X. And theanalyst.com. Ashton Genty has faced an 8-man plus defensive box on 30 carries this season. He is averaging 8.9 yards on those carries against an 8-man or higher box. So further evidence that this man is supernatural, and I would like to draft him in fantasy next year, and probably won't. But anyways, there's your Ashton Genty stat for the week.
There you go. Ways to connect with us at Game On Guys on Twitter/X, Facebook Game On Pod, Instagram and Threads GameOn.pod, TikTok gets Game On Pod. Email us at emailgameon@gmail.com, and always visit our website gameonpod.com. For Brad Bollinger, I'm Steve Braun. This has been another edition of Game On.